I know that this seed is definitely not optimal because I spawn in a cave at Y level 49 and this already causes some problems. I don't have wood and the nearest mineshaft is 250 blocks away. Yes, this challenge will require a lot of mining, but I'll make sure you don't get bored. Wait, not like this. Instead, I want to explain why I play in version 1.12. First of all, in 1.17 plus, the height limits drastically changed and it's simply not possible to beat the game in this challenge. I also decided to not play in version 1.13 to 1.16 because of how the player's spawn point is chosen. Anyway, back to the run. After roughly an hour of mining, I finally came across a mineshaft which allowed me to craft some basic tools and make a bit of progress. The next step was entering the Nether. Finding a lava pool wasn't difficult, but I couldn't just enter the Nether at any location. I had to dig a few extra 100 blocks to make sure that I stayed on Y level 49 even after entering the Nether. You may ask why it's specifically Y level 49, but I will explain it later. I had a fortress nearby which was easy to reach, but compared to the fortress itself, my Y level was pretty low. This made killing blazes quite difficult. Luckily, I only needed 4 blaze rods, and with the help of a fishing rod I was able to obtain all of them. It was definitely a challenge on its own. In total, the Nether part took nearly 3.5 hours to complete, which I didn't really expect when I started the challenge. After returning to the overworld, I had to dig another 1000 blocks to reach the stronghold. One thing I really underestimated in this challenge was the sheer amount of blocks I had to mine, which required some pickaxes. Eventually, I reached the stronghold, which also had the end portal at Y49. I only had a single pickaxe left, and on the way to the library it actually broke. Anyway, after mining all the wood in the library, roughly 1.5 stacks, I had enough materials to continue my journey. The next step was gathering materials for the end fight. I built a small arrow farm using a skeleton spawner, which was once again a few hundred blocks away from the portal room. I waited around 45 minutes to gather enough arrows. To destroy caged crystals in the upcoming end fight, you unfortunately can't use arrows because the hitbox of iron bars is a bit weird in this version. So I decided to use TNT instead, which I could obtain from desert temples. Of course, they were far away. At this point, I really want to thank CraftyMasterman for this amazing and definitely not boring challenge idea under my last video. Luckily, all desert temples spawn on the exact same Y level, which means I could access all the chests and TNT without any problems. I also looted a second desert temple later in the run because I needed a good amount of TNT for the next strategies. There was another spawner nearby as well, but instead of skeletons, I decided to farm a lot of rotten flesh. It's a decent food source, but more importantly, I needed a large amount of ender pearls. Of course, farming endermen directly, like blaze rods, is a viable option, but definitely not the most consistent one. Instead, I decided to use villager trading. Luckily, there was an igloo relatively close to the stronghold. But this introduced a new challenge. The igloo's basement was around 15 blocks below my Y level. You might ask, how do we transport this villager up to Y level 49? First, I cleared out all the blocks above the villager using TNT. After that, I made sure the villager couldn't escape by stacking gravel around it. At first, I thought placing water would be enough since the villager could just swim up, but that wasn't the case because... villager. Instead, I used a fishing rod to pull the villager up 1 block at a time, and the water prevented any fall damage. Everything worked perfectly and I didn't make a single mistake. After trading all my rotten flesh for ender pearls and some redstone which I needed for something else later in the run, it was finally time to conquer the ender dragon. Another small challenge was getting into the end portal itself. Sadly, you can't use ender pearls to enter the end portal because they slightly change your Y level when you use them, and I didn't want to use any strategies which did this. Instead, I used a red mushroom which I placed on a dirt block a few blocks below the portal. This was only possible with the use of a piston to push a dirt block a few blocks lower, which is required for a big mushroom. Finally, it was possible to walk into the end portal, and now I can explain why I had to stay on Y level 49 the entire run. The only fixed Y coordinate in the entire playthrough is when you enter the end and spawn on the obsidian platform. Technically, there is a glitch to get around this, but I tried to play as glitchless as possible. The end fountain on this seed also happened to be on the same Y level. Trust me, this seed took a long time to find because there were so many independent factors that each required a different filter, which I mostly had to code myself. My first task was destroying all the caged crystals, which I did using TNT cannons. I was actually surprised that just 4 TNT were enough to launch a single TNT that high with the right setup, and it worked perfectly. After destroying the 2 caged crystals, all there was left to do was shooting down the remaining ones. As it turns out, in 1.12 the dragon charges after it purchase, so I couldn't just kill it by shooting arrows the entire time. Instead, I bridged out 120 blocks and waited for the dragon to charge me. I still had to block every charge with my shield, but I was able to deal a decent amount of damage each time. After a few minutes, the dragon was finally beaten. Now, all there was left to do was entering the fountain, which was easier said than done. Instead of using a bedrock breaking method, I used an ender pearl. You might be confused since I mentioned earlier that ender pearls slightly change your Y level. However, there's one exception: dying. I made sure that I was below 2.5 hearts before throwing the pearl, and that's how I beat Minecraft on a single hide. I already beat Minecraft by restricting every form of horizontal movement, and in this challenge I entirely restricted the vertical movement. Next step, restricting vertical and horizontal movement. Yeah, surely something like this could be possible. You would have to spawn inside the end portal mid-air above the lava for this to work. How should a seed like this even theoretically exist? Oh wait, I think I found something.